Walt Disney was born in Chicago, fourth child in a family of five. He had three older brothers, Herbert, Raymond, and Roy, and a younger sister named Ruth. We'll talk about Roy later. The Walt Disney Company owes its existence to both Roy and Walter. You're watching SMAP's Education, the international channel on education. Here we talk about education and career opportunities abroad, about specifics of living in different countries, about people and companies you can learn from. Today we'll talk about Disney, the world's most recognized and successful animation studio. But this could have never happened if it wasn't for Walt Disney's commitment and ability to learn from his mistakes. Let's start from the very beginning. On his father's side, Walt's ancestors go back to the Norman knight Hugh Disney, who took part in the conquest of England in 1066. He later settled in Ireland. Walt's great-grandfather migrated from Ireland to Canada in 1834. Walt's father, Elias Disney, was born in Ontario, Canada in 1859. Elias Disney, during his life, worked as a construction worker at the Exposition of 1893. He grew oranges, sold newspapers, and owned a small hotel. When Walt was 4, his family moved to Marceline, a small town in Missouri, and bought a farm there. This boy from a big poor family acquired a passion for drawing at an early age. As a schoolboy, he delivered newspapers and bought drawing equipment with the money he earned. His dad punished him for what he believed were pointless expenses. Despite all this, Walt still managed to find time for his art and even sold his work drawing neighbors' pets. Walt's older brothers, Herbert and Ray, soon ran away from their father's house back to Chicago, for they couldn't stand living with him under the same roof. Elias was a strict father, and he also believed children could only be taught by force. Despite that, oddly enough, Walt remembered his father as teaching family values, importance of reputation, and hard work. And nevertheless, it weren't just Herbert and Ray who tried to leave home as soon as possible. At 19 years of age, Roy also left, and when Walt turned 16, he faked his ID and went to war. Walt hated staying with his father this much. However, he was not accepted into the army, but he was taken into the Red Cross instead. The admittance age there was only 17. After the war, he went to study drawing professionally. He began attending courses at the Kansas City Art Institute, and he also took night courses at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, where he studied academic drawing and painting. If you're interested in art schools and universities, visit smaps.com, where you can find a school of any type in any country, and our experts will answer any of your questions in the online chat. Moreover, you can even find short-term programs for the summer. Now back to Disney. Disney starts working at the Kansas City Film Ad Company, where he creates animations for different ads, which gives him experience of applying his skills in practice. At the studio, he met Ub Iwerks, his future colleague and fellow artist. Together with Ub, Disney created his first company, Iwerks Disney Commercial Artist. The company was making ads and commercial graphics, but it did not have enough clients to provide stable income for itself. As a result, Walt had to work on the side to support the business. Iwerks Disney Commercial Artist didn't last long. It had to close due to financial difficulties caused by lack of clients. Walt and Ub went back to Kansas City Film Ad Company. In 1922, Walt founded a new studio, a Laugh-O-Gram studio, where together with Iwerks they began creating fairy tale-themed short animation films. Walt was only 21 at the time. That studio had also faced financial difficulties and eventually went bankrupt. But it was there where the first successful animation projects were born, which laid the foundation for Walt Disney's future career. As you can see, Disney's initial projects failed, but it were those failures that led to Walt's current world fame. In 1923, after Laugh-O-Gram studio had went bankrupt, Walt Disney moved to Hollywood, the center of the film industry. Roy Disney, Walt's older brother, had already been living in California. The brothers decided to join forces to start a new business. On October 16, 1923, Walt and Roy founded their new company, the Disney Brothers Studio. At the beginning, Walt Disney and his brother Roy were working on their projects in their family's garage, using a do-it-yourself stand made out of boards and boxes to create cartoons. Americans sure do love working in garages. One could remember Steve Jobs, who had also started in a garage. Except few people mention that these garages are located in some of the richest communities of California. Watch our video on ups and downs of Steve Jobs' career. The Disney Brothers paid their uncle $5 a week to rent his workspace. That is how the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio Company started. One of its first projects was the Alice comedy series, which combined live acting performances with animation. Alice was played by a 4-year-old actress Virginia Davis, and the animation was created by Ivex, who had also moved to Hollywood. The first film from the Alice's Wonderland series was made in Kansas City. Walt sent it to Hollywood to bring attention to his new project. Margaret Winkler, one of the first woman film distributors, loved the film and agreed to finance the series. 57 episodes of Alice comedies had been created between 1923 and 1927. During that time, Alice had been played by several different actresses, but the main concept remained unchanged. At the end of 1920s, Alice comedies' popularity began to decline. That coincided with the creation of a new character, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, who became the studio's new focus. Walt and Earp created the image of Oswald the Rabbit, which was a precursor to Mickey Mouse. Oswald quickly became popular, and the series of short films about the character started to generate significant income for the studio. But it had its problems. In 1927, Universal Pictures agreed to distribute the cartoons about the rabbit, and it helped with its popularity. But in 1928, Walt Disney decided to review his contract with Universal. He wanted better terms and increased financing of his animation films. But Universal Pictures rejected his demands and claimed rights for his character of Oswald. The problem was that Walt hadn't registered the rights for Oswald to himself or his studio. Instead, they were owned by Universal Pictures. When Disney had tried to negotiate better terms, Universal not only had rejected them but kept many of his animators, so they had lost Oswald. But Walt and Earp began working on a new character. Thus, Mickey Mouse was born, who would not only replace Oswald but exceeded his fame and success. First cartoons featuring Mickey Mouse, such as the Steamboat Willie, had been a huge success and laid a foundation for the Disney company's future growth. Ivex once told in an interview that for a long time he had been experimenting with other types of cartoon animals. A frog, a kitten, a puppy, all were rejected by Walt. The idea of a mouse came from memories of working at the Kansas City studio. According to Walt, back then studios were full of rodents. And in this way, Walt wanted to tame one of them. By the way, initially Walt wanted to name his character Mortimer, but his wife Lillian gave him the idea of the name Mickey, since it was simpler, easier to remember and spell. But as for the Oswald the Rabbit, in 2016 Disney was able to regain the rights to it. This was the result of an exchange in which Disney gave NBC Universal the rights to sports commentator Al Michaels, and in return received the rights to Oswald and all the films made with him. The next iconic film in Disney's career was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. While still a newspaper delivery boy during his school years, Walt first saw the silent film Snow White, which he remembered for the rest of his life. It took Walt 3 years and more than $1.5 million to create his vision of Snow White based on the Grimm brothers' fairy tale. Although initially no one took this project seriously, everyone thought it would be crazy to create a full-length cartoon. Initially, $250,000 were allocated for the project, but Disney took out a bank loan to accomplish his goal and turned out to have been right. In just its first year, the film earned over $8 million, and in total it brought more than $400 million. During the work on the picture, 1.5 million drawings were created. Interestingly, the artist created the dwarfs and the animals based on their ideas and observations, but to depict people, rotoscoping was used. Each animation frame was transferred from a video with real actors using tracing paper. It was this method that made it possible to achieve realism in animation. For Snow White, Disney received multiple awards, including an Oscar. He received 1 regular statuette, and in addition to it, he was given 7 more mini-Oscars for the number of dwarfs. In 1989, the United States Library of Congress recognized the film as culturally and historically significant and selected it as one of the first 25 films to be presented in the National Film Registry. The American Film Institute included it in the list of the 100 greatest American films, and in 2008 named it the greatest American animated film of all time. Keep in mind, this version of Snow White came out in 1937. 3 years later, in 1940, Pinocchio was released, based on a fairy tale by Italian writer Carlo Collodi. It will also be critically acclaimed. The success of the film was the result of enormous work to make the scene where Pinocchio tries to escape from the whale more realistic. The artist had been observing the behavior of real whales for a long time. The film's score, composed by Lee Harline, Paul Smith and Ned Washington, won an Academy Award, and a special recognition was received by the song When You Wish Upon a Star, written by Lee Harline with lyrics by Ned Washington. And of course, Cinderella. The film was released in the post-war period, and the future of the company essentially depended on its success. During the war, film screenings decreased and Disney was producing lower-budget cartoons. Accordingly, revenue was significantly lower. During this period, Walt Disney was less prone to experimenting or trying unfamiliar techniques. In Cinderella, as well as in Snow White, rotoscoping was used. Different shades of cool blue-green were intentionally used in the film's landscapes to make the main characters seem more vibrant and alive.
Я такое придумала! Бибиди-бобиди, бибиди-бобиди, бибиди-бобиди.
And did you know that Cinderella was drawn from a real-life actress? Helen Stanley, a ballet dancer and a real-life model for Cinderella. And also Aurora from Sleeping Beauty and Anita from 101 Dalmatians. Imagine, it's 1949 and you walk into a studio to be a model for an animation film. At the studio, they were choosing images, outfits and hairstyles. She acted out the episodes and it was all recorded on film. The footage was transferred into drawings. They decided to make Cinderella blonde, because according to research, this image was more suitable for a deprived young girl. The film's production cost $2.5 million, but it earned $4 million for the first release alone, which significantly improved the studio's precocious post-war state. The film also received the Golden Bear Award at the Berlin Film Festival in 1951, and Walt Disney received the Venice Film Festival Award in 1950. In 1966, after Walt's death, the company experienced its first serious crisis. Roy remained to manage the company, but he was not an animator, but a financier. By that time, the company had a large team of animators, but following Walt's recent project, The Jungle Book, Disney had been producing less ravishing and memorable works. For almost 20 years, the company had been on the edge and there were rumors that it would soon close. The company was given a second life by an American businessman, Michael Eisner, who was invited as a chairman. At the same time, the reconstruction of the company began. The Walt Disney Television Animation Division was created, which made cartoons especially for television. The company will enjoy success of its new cartoons that would become hits: The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. The latter, by the way, will become the most successful film in the entire history of the company. The period when the company flourished under Walt, thanks to Snow White and Pinocchio, can be called the golden age of American animation. All this was long before computer graphics, but when it had started to be commonly used to create animation films, Disney, oddly enough, had not been able to adapt to it for a long time. At first, the company somehow did not dare to start using computer graphics for animated films, although it used it in the films The Black Hole and Tron. The company decided to move away from traditional animation only when they discovered how Pixar had succeeded in doing so. Meanwhile, people at Pixar were betting on computer graphics in principle, but they were not taken seriously. The company itself did not have enough funds to implement all the ideas, so Disney offered their help. And here's a fun fact. I mentioned Steve Jobs for a reason. He was one of the founders of Pixar, having once bought it for $10 million from Lucasfilm, which gave us Star Wars. And in 2006, Disney will acquire Pixar for $7.4 billion and give 7% of its shares to Steve Jobs. Thus, Steve Jobs will become the largest shareholder of the Walt Disney Company. In 1995, the world saw Pixar's Toy Story. It was the first entirely computer-animated film. Toy Story was a huge success, gathering $373 million at the box office. Following this, Disney and Pixar collaborated on 5 more computer-animated films. A Bug's Life in 1998, Toy Story 2 in 1999, Monsters Incorporated in 2001, and Finding Nemo in 2003. Disney's role was that of a distributor, and Pixar created the movies using its own animation software. In its own projects like 1997's Hercules and 1998's Mulan, Disney continued to use traditional animation, and compared to the popular computer-animated Shrek and Ice Age in the early 2000s, their films look kinda outdated. This led the company into a new period of decline. In 2002, the studio attempted a dramatic change of direction towards computer graphics, firing long-time employees and creating a new computer animation department. However, Treasure Planet, released the same year, was a box office failure. Failures followed Disney until 2005, when the current head of the company resigned and Bob Iger took his place. So, in 2006, Disney acquires Pixar, and 3 years later, in 2009, Marvel. Pixar will help Disney pull off computer animation, and Marvel will attract male audience with superheroes. The first Marvel film distributed by Disney was released in 2012. It was The Avengers. More than 2,000 special effects were added to the project, created by 14 different companies. The bulk of the work was carried out by the Industrial Light and Magic, which was a division of Lucasfilm, founded by George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, as I've already mentioned. And what's gonna happen in 2012? Disney will acquire Lucasfilm along with ILM for $4 billion. Since then, Industrial Light and Magic has been handling virtually all special effects on Disney films, including the new Star Wars and basically everything around them.